In the last tutorial we looked at motion tracking, but we skipped corner pin tracking, so we'll have a look at that in this tutorial. So I have a shot here that's the perfect candidate. As we can see, there's a rectangular screen that's just asking to have something put on it. But also this shot is not ideal for tracking, because as we can see with the fingers are often covering corners of the screen that will be quite useful to us later. But let's see how we get on. So if I were to just go into the tracking as usual, we can see that initially, because I only have one tracking point available, the only position is available to me. As soon as I add a second one, insert, then I can do rotation and size. So you would think that by the time I've added 4, corner pinning would come to life. As you can see, it doesn't. The reason is that corner pinning is a specific function of the Comp3D effect. And because we don't have one in our stack, Mistika is simply allowing us to add multiple points. So if we were to track with this, what we'd be able to derive would be XY movement and Z rotation based on an average of the movement of all these points. So that's not what we want in this instance, so I'm going to delete those out. I'm going to go back to my timeline and I'm going to add in Comp3D and go back to tracking and click corner pin. We can see that straight away Mistika gives us 4 tracking points and it's named them upper left, upper right, down left and down right. And when we come to apply corner pinning, there's only one logical place they'll go, and that's into the layer of Comp3D, because awaiting in Comp3D's parameters are related upper left, right, down left points, just as we saw in the Comp3D tutorial. So let's go ahead and track this. I'm just going to double click on the neat shot just to make sure that when I track I'm not picking up any movement that I might have accidentally put in here. And let's just place these just quickly into the corners. Well, I guess in fact I should go to a point where I can at least see all the corners. Now we know that these points are going to get disturbed, but just to see what happens I'm going to click both to make it track in both directions. So if we concentrate on this side of the screen first, we can see that our tracking has done a reasonably good job, probably good enough for what we need right now. So given that they're okay, I'm going to select them both and press H for hide, same as pressing this button here. It just means that when I run the tracker again, these won't be recalculated. So now let's look at our troublesome points. Obviously we can see, let's start with down right. We can see that down right started off okay, but as soon as it loses sight of the corner, of course it doesn't really know what to do. But at least the first part of the shot is rescuable. We can use the tracker up to probably here. So what I'll do is I'll set a point here, which basically means that now when I start tracking or removing ranges, it's only going to work on this part of the track, which is our faulty part of the track, if you like. And now we'll try to see if we can maintain a track for that area, given that obviously we can't see the corner. In fact, I'll also hide this one, because I'm only going to be working on here. So with the tracker selected, I'm initially going to go remove range. So that's now deleted all the tracking points that it had falsely created around here. So we've still got this half of the track, haven't got this half of the track. So we can think of a few different ways perhaps of trying to pick up this track. One thing often is to try and track something close. The problem with this shot is that if I track something like this, it's a repetitive pattern, it's unlikely to track because each one of these little features is exactly like the one next to it, so the tracker's likely to jump all over the place. I could track something over here, but this will move very differently to this corner because it's further away, it's a different angle, different part of the lens. So ideally I want something a bit closer, but there's not a great deal of features to track on here at the moment. So I'm going to go on a few frames. This might be a possibility in here, except of course it gets covered too. It gets revealed around frame 10, so perhaps what we could achieve here is for the frames where the corner is vanishing, we could use the fact that this shape, these lines, will guide us to the corner to manually insert a keyframe here. So let's go to frame 10, and I'm just going to grab the tracker and move it so that our shape lines match the edge of the screen, so we can be reasonably confident that's in the corner. Because I put a single keyframe there, Mistika will animate between the two. I can make a correction here, frame 13. Okay, so we've got a bit more of our track done, all of 3 or 4 more frames. So let's try and track something from here, see if it will follow it. So what I'm going to do is hold down Alt and drag the tracker over here. Because by holding down Alt, I'm saying I still want to build this point here, but I'm going to do it by tracking a feature that's offset from it. Also, since I'm reasonably happy with what I've done in this part of the track, I'm also going to set a limit to frame 11 so I don't undo this. So let's track backwards. Okay, we're getting something that's reasonably close, probably good enough for now. Certainly we can see that this line is following the edge of the screen, which is a good indication that we must be somewhere in the right ballpark. So with that done, I'll hide this tracking mark. And we'll now look at this troublesome one up here. So I'm going to press Shift and H, reveal tracker. And let's see what problems we have here. So again, similar situation. Track's fine right up until the finger disappears. And we just get the corner peeking back out at the beginning of the shot. But realistically, whereas we got away with tracking some features down here for this corner, we've got nothing to help us up here. This is just blurred stuff. It's not going to follow anything. So I think we're on our own here. So making sure we've got keyframes right up until we can see the corner. So that's the first bad frame. Let's just set that as a out point. So we've got this range specified, which we know is bad. So again, ensuring that this is the selected tracking point, remove range. So now we can see that our shape ceases to track at that point. I'm just going to manually place this tracker into the corner on, I was going to say on the frames that we can see, but actually just from animating those few frames, again, I think that's probably good enough for us for the time being. So what we have is a 4-point track. Now I'm almost ready to apply that into layer 1. The things that I must remember to do before I apply is I must make sure that all my trackers are revealed. Otherwise only the revealed ones will apply into the track. And likewise I just need to make sure that there's no restriction on the range, but actually as I changed into Comp 3D it has its own range, so it was cleared anyway. So with that done, I'm just going to go Apply Move, and I'm going to go back to my timeline, because obviously Comp 3D is going to need something to use as a foreground. We're using the clip we tracked as a background. So I've got this graph here, which we're going to insert. So let's go into the visual editor, and we can see what the trackers have done. By populating the corner pinning parameters, the top left corner of the foreground has been dragged to be in this place, and the bottom left and top right and bottom right. Now we can drag around these curves as a whole, or we can influence individual keyframes if we want to, if there's anything wrong. For example, we could see the upper left one hasn't quite filled the screen. So I could take the upper left parameter and just nudge it around, because as long as auto key is off, it's nudging around the whole tracking curve. So in terms of a tracking tutorial, that about does it. But let's, while we're at it, finish up this shot using the techniques we've learnt over the last few tutorials. So the first thing I would do is change the keying mode, the blending mode of Comp3D. Let's just hide these, which is in Attributes. I'm going to change it to Screen, because Screen will effectively add my graph onto the background, so that way it'll inherit all those nice gleams off the glass. Next thing I'll look at is the edges are quite sharp and aliasy. So just in the background, I'm just going to insert a crop. And then in the softness of the crop, I'm just going to add in a little bit of softness, because it's just going to blend in those edges a bit better. We might also consider that the image on the screen is a bit unrealistically bright, so perhaps we'd also add in a color corrector, perhaps. To make the image a little bit more screen-like. Then finally we have the issue, of course, of the fingers going over. Now we could use the shapes to cut them out and stick them back on, but I'd normally go for shapes as a last resort, just on the grounds that that involves some effort, and would be better to work out a method that takes a lot less work. So one thing that catches my eye here is that the fingers are the only reddish, pinkish thing in the scene, which possibly gives us an opportunity for a chroma key. So I'm going to use a color corrector, and what I'm going to try and do is force them into giving me a matte. So I'm going to whack up the saturation, go into a vector and pick my lovely skin tone. Let's widen that out so we get somewhere. Remember, I'm only worried about the screen area. It doesn't matter if I've got spill here, because I'm basically going to key the original version of this image back over itself. So if there's any holes in the matte around here, it doesn't matter. It's itself over itself, we won't see. Smooth that out a little bit. And export our key, look at our key channel, go to our pick key, and just see if we can refine this as much as we can. Now let's start with that and see where we get. Now of course, if I were to straight key that over, the problem I have is that I've color corrected it. So yes, I'm getting it to key over, but I'll take a flying guess my client's not going to like those skin tones. So the way we can deal with that is we say that this is only going to generate the matte. So I'm going to go to Effects, Show Key. And now we can see that this is generating just an alpha channel. I'm going to copy the original shot. I'm just going to group that just to be neat and tidy. So that's my matte, at the moment at least. And I'm going to bring back a copy of the original, and I'm going to use External Key. So as we've seen before, what's happening with this little group then is, because of Show Key, what used to be an alpha channel is now the video channel here. And I'm using External Key to take the original colours of the picture and attach our forced alpha channel to them. So if I just connect that back in to make sure that it's connected to this Comp 3D. So just as a recap, we've got this Comp 3D in the middle that's placing the screen in with the 4-point tracking, but then around that I've got a second Comp 3D that's keying the fingers back over the front. Okay, so now we've got something that's sort of going to work. It's going to need a little bit more work, but you get the idea. The edges are a little bit rough around here, so they'll just need a little bit of fixing up. And also I don't really want to key this part of the red because that's just a reflection. So I guess I could probably deal with that actually in color correction, because what I could simply do is use one of the shapes as a garbage mat and just make sure that that reflection of the finger might get a bit difficult in there where they join up, but it's only in the screen that I'm interested. Okay, rough and ready, but it might work. You never know. Yeah. So very roughly and quickly, how we're using the tracking and the keying together to make a single shot. One other thing actually is we can see that the product is sharp here and defocused in the distance, whereas our insert is sharp here and still sharp here. So I guess if we wanted to, we could go and find the frame that we're inserting into the screen, G for group to give us some room, and I could use one of the blur tools that allows us to blur by an alpha channel. Now I'm just adding on wipe with one input, and what that does, a wipe with one input, is the wipe goes onto the alpha channel. So I'm going to make a soft wipe like this, and then I'm going to pick a blur, but the blur parameter I'm going to use is RGB radius alpha, which basically means that the blur will be driven by how bright the alpha channel is. So you can see it's got more blur down the bottom than it has at the top. So just to make it easier to see what we're doing, I'm just going to take off the softness so it's a hard line, out of the group, and just look at our final comp. You've noticed that I've only keyed half the shot because I've made an error. By putting an alpha channel on here, of course only the alpha channel gets keyed in the Comp 3D. So what I can also add on here is clear alpha. So in other words, the alpha will appear here long enough for me to make the blur, but then it's cleared away so it doesn't get in the way of being keyed. So we can now just tweak that defocus to be the right way around. Soften that out, and it isn't quite that defocused at that far end. Something like that anyway. So that completes the tutorials on the internal motion tracking abilities of Mistika.